time, we pay tribute to the tragic bravery of Christopher and Dana Reeve. Share in the frustrations of Julie Andrews. Delve into the torment of Montgomery Clift. And feel the pain of Sharon Stone. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. It's a maxim that is certainly true of Charlize Theron. Growing up in a small farming community in South Africa, Charlize had a painful childhood. At the age of 16, she was home from boarding school when her mother, Gerda, shot her father, Charles, dead after he attacked her in yet another drunken rage. Because her actions were judged to be in self-defense, Gerda did not go to prison. Instead, she focused on Charlize's future, encouraging her to become a model. Preferring dance, Charlize studied ballet until a knee injury counted that out as a career option. Undaunted, in the early 90s, she made her way to Los Angeles and scored an agent when he overheard her throwing a tantrum in front of a bank teller who wouldn't cash a check. But there were still other obstacles to overcome. With Afrikaans as her first language, she learned English from television soaps, and by 1995 was getting small roles in films.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah.
The high point of her career so far came in 2003, when she gained 30 pounds in weight and won that year's Academy Award for her work in the film Monster, playing the serial killer Eileen Wuornos.
I cooked it up. It's not rocket science. I sit in a room and I get these ideas and I make them into films, and some of them are good ideas and come out good and some of them don't.
Woody Allen knows all about life's ups and downs. He's had more than enough of them in his prolific filmmaking career. But the man who also once wisecracked, "If my film makes one more person miserable, I'll feel I've done my job," has also known his share of pain and isolation. Allen found himself embroiled in a major scandal in 1992 when his long-term girlfriend, Mia Farrow, discovered nude photographs Woody had taken of her adopted daughter, Soon-Yi Previn. Mia pursued a long and ugly legal battle with him over custody of their biological son, Satchel, and allegations that he had sexually molested one of their two adopted children, who was 7 years old at the time. The judge deemed all the charges inconclusive and the case never went to trial, but Mia won custody of all 3 children.
I feel he should have increased it to a greater degree than he did, but he left that open for reevaluation, and I think that in a future date, he will increase that.
The scandal never really affected Woody's professional life, however. As the maker of such films as Annie Hall, Hannah and Her Sisters, and The Purple Rose of Cairo, he continued his long pattern of making a film every year. And despite the 35-year age gap, in 1997 he married Soon-Yi, and they now have 2 adopted daughters. Never a big fan of publicity, Allen's few public comments about the scandal include an interview with Vanity Fair magazine in 2005, when he asserted that he was glad Farrow had found the incriminating photographs. "It was just one of those fortuitous events," he said, "one of the great pieces of luck in my life, a turning point for the better." In the mid-2000s, Woody even found his career rallying, particularly with 2005's Match Point, which was nominated for an Oscar. Not that Woody would have turned up for the ceremony. Monday nights are always reserved for playing clarinet in his beloved jazz band. The plummy and proper Julie Andrews may be revered as royalty these days, but her start in life was far from aristocratic. Her early years were spent in poverty in a London slum, as her mother and stepfather tried to make a living performing in music halls. By 1958, she'd become the toast of Broadway and London's West End, after starring in the smash hit of the decade, My Fair Lady. And Julie couldn't get enough of Eliza Doolittle.
Thought of another 2 years, perhaps, in the same play?
This play, yes.
What makes this one special?
Well, it's just, you know, you can never stop working on this play. I still feel there's so much to do that I can do with it. You know, and it's nice to feel that there's that to come.
After rave reviews and sellout seasons on both sides of the Atlantic, Julie looked set to reprise the role in the big screen version of My Fair Lady, until a movie studio head passed her over to cast Audrey Hepburn instead. Audrey may have had greater star power, but her singing voice wasn't up to the task, and her songs were overdubbed by another vocalist. Julie was devastated by the decision. However, she won a great consolation prize in the part of Mary Poppins, which won her an Academy Award. As part of her acceptance speech, she thanked Jack Warner for not casting her in My Fair Lady. She enjoyed incredible success over the next few years with The Sound of Music and Thoroughly Modern Millie, but the subsequent demise of the movie musical took Julie's career down with it. 30 years later, while riding the crest of a momentous comeback in the stage version of Victor Victoria, disaster struck and she lost her voice. The show closed and she underwent surgery to remove nodules from her throat. Julie has now had to come to terms with the fact her voice may never fully recover.
I don't know. Chances are perhaps not. You never know. I'm always optimistic. But the amazing thing is that I've never been busier. And I do sometimes wonder if I would have embraced all I am embracing now if I was still singing, you know? Life has a nice way of surprising.
Coming up, Christopher and Dana Reeve. On the big screen, only kryptonite could harm him. In real life, Christopher Reeve proved he was just as vulnerable as any other mortal after breaking his neck in a riding accident. The former Superman had taken up horse riding in 1985 and quickly took up training to compete in 3-day events. And on May 27, 1995, while riding cross-country in Virginia, his horse, aptly named Buck, stopped suddenly before a fence, and Christopher was thrown, landing headfirst and crushing his first and second vertebrae. He stopped breathing 3 minutes before the paramedics arrived. He was revived and flown to the University of Virginia Medical Center. 5 days later, he woke up to the devastating news that he would remain paralyzed from the neck down for the rest of his life. The tragic twist of fate also had its fair share of spooky coincidence. Just months before the accident, Christopher had played a paralyzed police officer in the HBO film Above Suspicion. As preparation for the role, he had done research at a rehabilitation hospital, learning how to navigate with a wheelchair. However, his own rehabilitation was long and grueling. After having holes drilled into his skull to reconnect his head to his spine, he had to endure many blood transfusions and learn to breathe through a tube, which would frequently become disconnected and leave him gasping for air. By the time he left hospital, he'd regained the fighting spirit that had made him so competitive in pursuits as varied as sailing, skiing, mountain climbing, baseball, and tennis. Although now all he could do was watch.
His spirits are, for the most part, quite good. He's been visiting daily with the children and other family members, watching hockey on TV. I think his spirits might be better if the Rangers were in the playoffs, but can't do anything about that.
With his sporting days behind him, he plowed all of his available energy into raising awareness of the plight of disabled people. He made a speech at the Academy Awards in 1996 and narrated a documentary entitled Without Pity, a film about abilities, and addressed delegates at a Democratic convention.
So many dreams at first seem impossible. America does not let its needy citizens fend for themselves. We just need to raise our expectations.
As well as making his directorial debut in the HBO film In the Gloaming with Glenn Close, he starred in a remake of Alfred Hitchcock's classic Rear Window. The 1998 TV movie about a wheelchair voyeur who thinks one of his neighbors has been murdered also starred Daryl Hannah. He even wrote an autobiography entitled Still Me. But the project for which he preserved his greatest passion was the Christopher Reeve Foundation, which raises money for stem cell research and provides grants to improve the lives of disabled people. He also co-founded the Reeve Irvine Research Center, which has become one of the leading spinal cord research centers in the world. Christopher's tireless search for a cure took him overseas. He even went on a fact-finding mission to Israel.
I am honored to be here and to come to this part of the world, and it is an extraordinary place, and there are many people who are suffering, but there are also many people who are healing, and some of the best research and science in the world is happening in Israel, and also some of the best care for patients is happening here.
The initial prognosis was that Christopher would never be able to move any part of his body. However, he was determined to keep himself as strong as possible, ever hopeful that someday a cure for his injuries would be found. In 2000, he stumped doctors by regaining some movement in his left hand. Throughout his ordeal, his actor wife Dana not only put her career on hold to care for him, she became a motivational speaker and activist in her own right. She also hosted a medical show on television, and in 2002, the couple founded the Christopher and Dana Reeve Paralysis Resource Center to teach paralyzed people how to live independently. Together, they became a formidable force in the fight to extend research on embryonic stem cells.
In sickness and in health, well, we put you to the test.
But even as Christopher continued lobbying, his health was deteriorating. In October 2004, he received treatment for the latest in a long line of pressure wounds that caused complicated infections. He suffered a heart attack and fell into a coma. 18 hours later, he died of a heart failure, with doctors believing it was an allergic reaction to an antibiotic that had dealt the final blow. His memorial service was held at the prestigious Juilliard School, where he and Robin Williams had studied together in the 1960s. Among those who came to honor his life were Hillary Clinton, Susan Sarandon, and Alec Baldwin. After nearly 10 years of continuously preparing herself for the worst, Dana was finally laying her superhero husband to rest. But that was not the end of her tragedy. Just 9 months later, she was diagnosed with lung cancer and faced a lonely battle of painful tests and treatments. Despite the poor prognosis, she stayed positive.
My health, I'm feeling great, surprisingly.
She gave credit to Christopher.
I had a great model. I was married to a man who never gave up and was facing, it's harder than this, what he was facing every day, because I feel so close to Chris during this as well because of some of the treatments that I've been going through, the MRIs and the things, getting stuck with IV needles. He taught me so much about courage and about going forward, and he really lives with me in this. And I think that, again, I'm very, very lucky. I have so much support and so much positive energy in my life.
Her illness couldn't keep her away from a star-studded event to raise funds for the foundation, where she presented an award to Michael Douglas and Catherine Zeta-Jones.
What a friendship we had, and I really think that Dana is a living saint. I really do, and I'd like you to applaud her.
But sadly, by March the next year, Dana had lost her battle against the disease. At the age of 44, she joined her husband and left behind their teenage son, William. At her memorial service, Christopher's neurosurgeon, John MacDonald, paid tribute to the extraordinary bravery and generosity of the tragic couple.
I think their legacy and Dana's legacy is hope. I think they've already changed the lives of so many, but that'll continue. They're going to change the lives of those living today and those living tomorrow.
When Marilyn Monroe describes you to the world as the only person I know who is in worse shape than I am, you know you've got problems. Marilyn worked with Montgomery Clift in 1961 in the Arthur Miller film The Misfits. It was her last completed film and also Clark Gable's. Montgomery managed 3 more, but only just. 5 years later, at the age of only 45, he was dead from a heart attack, brought on by years of drug and alcohol abuse. He and Marlon Brando had been dubbed the Gold Dust Twins due to their rapid rise to fame. But how did his life turn into such a train wreck? Well, if you substitute the word car for the word train, you'll find part of the answer. On the 12th of May 1956, during the shooting of Raintree County, Monty was driving home after a party at co-star Elizabeth Taylor's house when he smashed into a telephone pole. His life was saved by Liz, who removed 2 teeth lodged in his throat, but his face and career were never the same again. The accident wasn't the start of his problems, though, which many believe stem from confusion and shame over his homosexuality, never something to be advertised in 1950s Hollywood. And certainly not for a young man hyped as a handsome matinee idol who starred in a succession of hit films like Red River, A Place in the Sun, and From Here to Eternity. On and off screen, the 4-time Oscar-nominated but increasingly vulnerable Montgomery inspired love and loyalty from both men and women. Elizabeth Taylor was an unshakable source of support, and so was Katharine Hepburn, their co-star in the Tennessee Williams melodrama Suddenly Last Summer. After a difficult and tense shoot, the protective Hepburn is said to have approached Joseph Mankiewicz, making sure that neither she nor Monty were required for any further filming, before spitting in the famous director's face. Montgomery was a new breed of actor, capitalizing on the post-World War II trend for more tormented and introspective leading men, and paving the way for actors like James Dean.
I traveled all over America.
It is perhaps no coincidence that neither of them survived long in the cutthroat world that is Hollywood, USA.
I don't mind.
Frequently regarded as one of the most beautiful women in Hollywood, Gene Tierney is another star whose glamorous screen image hides a painful personal history. She was born in Brooklyn, New York in 1920 and began her film career after a spell at the prestigious American Academy of Dramatic Art. Her first film role was opposite Henry Fonda in 1940's The Return of Jesse James. And this was followed by a succession of triumphs in films like Heaven Can Wait, The Razor's Edge, and most famously, Laura. Off-camera, though, things were very different. Her personal problems began in 1943, when she became pregnant to first husband Oleg Cassini. While making an appearance at the Hollywood Canteen, Tierney contracted German measles, apparently from a fan who had sneaked out of a sickbay to see her favorite star. Tierney's daughter was born prematurely, undersized, deaf, partially blind with cataracts, and with a severe mental disability. Tierney suffered tremendous grief, leading to a long period of depression and the onset of bipolar disorder. By 1955, her mental instability was badly affecting her work, and encouraged by her co-star Humphrey Bogart, she approached a psychiatrist before being admitted to the Institute of Living in Connecticut. After undergoing some 27 rounds of electric shock treatment, Tierney attempted to escape from the institution but was caught. She later became a vocal opponent of the treatment, claiming it had removed substantial parts of her memory. 2 years later, a neighbor witnessed her preparing to throw herself from a ledge, which led to another spell in a mental health clinic. Part of the treatment this time included working as a salesgirl in a store, resulting in sensationalist headlines in the tabloids when she was recognized. In later years, Tierney was to make a professional and personal comeback. Amid many accusations and counter-accusations of adultery, she divorced Cassini before marrying the oil man W. Howard Lee in 1960. Her later films included 1962's Advice and Consent before her final screen acting appearance in the 1980 miniseries Scruples. In a final cruel twist of fate, at the age of 70 she died of emphysema, which was probably brought on by her decision to take up smoking early in her career in an effort to lower her voice. With her killer looks and an alleged IQ of 154, Sharon Stone may have won out in the beauty and intelligence stakes, but that hasn't bought her immunity to pain. By the time she was cast in 1990's Total Recall, she'd sunk to posing nude for Playboy magazine. Shortly after the film's release, she was involved in a car accident on Sunset Boulevard. The next morning, she allegedly woke up almost completely paralyzed and lay on the floor for 3 days crying until she was found and taken to hospital. She had a dislocated shoulder and jaw, as well as several broken ribs and compressed discs in her back. In 2001, she had another near-death experience when a brain hemorrhage struck without warning, leaving her bedridden in hospital. Sharon told a British newspaper that she had felt 2 unbelievably painful shots in the left side of her head that physically knocked her over to the couch. Apparently, it took the doctors 11 days to find out that she was hemorrhaging into her brain. Although Sharon recovered from the blow, her marriage to Phil Bronstein did not. They split up while Sharon was convalescing. After her recovery, Sharon mounted a comeback, signing up as a spokesperson for Dior and putting her hand up to star in Basic Instinct 2.
Well, you know, very rarely do you find a script that's extraordinarily well written, and I think particularly in the noir category, because noir has a slightly B-ish flavor anyway, so to have it tight and well written enough that it is an A film is an unusual thing. So you have to look and look to find a really good one, and this just happens to be a good one.
Unfortunately, however, it seems Sharon's own basic instincts and the ability to pick a good script may have deserted her. Basic Instinct 2 cleaned up at the Golden Raspberry Awards, earning her a Razzie for Worst Actress and Worst Couple. However, her incredible fundraising efforts at the annual AMFAR Gala at the Cannes Film Festival have led some colleagues to suggest that she could become a professional auctioneer. Or perhaps after her duet with Kylie Minogue, she's making plans to launch a singing career.
Three, two, one.